Welcome everyone to the Create Deeper Donor Engagement Through Inclusive Messaging Lunch and Learn, which is hosted by our local AFP Golden Gate chapter. My name is Wanda Scott, and I'm a member of the Programs Committee and board member of AFP Golden Gate chapter. As you know, we are going to be recording today, and so we're thankful for everyone who is participating. We wanted to start off kind of as an introduction to give a quick poll and to get a sense of comfortability of using this topic today. So let me launch. Okay, can everybody see that? No?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, good. So how comfortable are you with writing inclusive messages? You just get one choice. All right, moving up. Yeah, so are you not comfortable at all? Somewhat comfortable? You're okay with it. Or somewhat uncomfortable, I'm sorry. Neutral and somewhat comfortable, and then very comfortable with inclusive messaging. Okay, I think this might be, oh, two more people. Oh, that might be us. Is that us? No. Might be us. Okay. So this is good. So it looks like 61% is somewhat comfortable. 22% neutral, 6%. No one is not comfortable at all. So that's good. And we have two people that are very, very comfortable. Thank you for participating in the poll. There's your results. All right, so really excited about the conversation today. This is I see it as a really important session for fundraisers and just people in general that are working in the nonprofit field, and how we communicate the stories that emanate from the people that we serve and we're closely connected to. So in this workshop, you'll learn how to utilize asset-based framing, or framing stories through a community's aspirations and contributions rather than their challenges and deficits, so that we can shift how donors see themselves in relation to our organization. Reframing these stories will help donors participate in the work rather than be saviors of it, engaging them more deeply and meaningfully. We're grateful to have the members with us today to lead in this important and useful lunch and learn. Now I'd like to turn things over to Sarah and Tierney.
Thank you, Wanda. And Tierney, maybe as you're popping up our presentation, I'll just do a little bit of chatting. I want to thank AFP Golden Gate for setting this up for us. We are big fans of sharing our learning. It's a subject about which we have a lot of passion. And I also want to congratulate that one person who said they were somewhat uncomfortable, because this is a journey and it takes a while, and it's kind of never ending, at least in my experience. So there's times when you're going to feel like you know exactly what to do, and there are going to be times when you don't. And, recognizing, as my colleague Tierney would say, some of that is the work right there. I want to introduce ourselves. I'll start with me, and Tierney, then I'll pass to you. My name is Sarah Moore, and I am Director of Brand Strategy and a partner at Mission Minded. We are a nationwide firm. I'll talk a little bit about us in a moment. I sit in Napa, California, and where I'm currently also in my non-day job, board vice president and member of a capital campaign task force for our mental health services nonprofit up here in the Valley. So I have a lot of empathy for the work of many of you on this call. Tierney, you want to introduce yourself?
I can. It is awesome to be here celebrating lunch with you all today. I'm Tierney Yates. I'm the founder and principal consultant at Little Light Consulting Firm, as well as a diversity, equity, and inclusion advisor for Mission Minded. I am so ecstatic to be here with you all. I'm based in Los Angeles, California, but I lived in the Bay Area for 13 years. If there's any San Jose State alumni in this room, hello, y'all. Go Spartans. And also too, before I started my consultancy, I was a development director in the Bay Area as well, with many organizations. And so fundraising has been really at the core and foundation of my work. And I've always included and enabled diverse inclusive and equitable practices within my fundraising, just because I felt like it was necessary. And also too, it needed to push against the traditions of nonprofit fundraising. And so again, I'm happy to be here with you. Love looking at those poll results. I think we're going to get into some good conversation today. And I'm going to pass it back over to Sarah.
Thanks, T. And we are here today together representing Mission Minded, just to give you a little 2-second overview of who's in the room and why we are able to comment on all of this learning that we're going to do today. We are a strategy and creative firm, and we help good causes have greater impact. And one of the things we believe is that organizations that make our world better need to be unapologetically bold. Part of this work is really being unapologetically bold. And so every day we're asking one simple question together with our clients: what if? And so what we're doing is we're finding the opportunities for you to break the mold and fire up your supporters, because we know that when your community is galvanized by magnetic ideas, they'll really stop at nothing to help you achieve extraordinary results. And you all know as fundraisers that that is often how you are thinking about the opportunities that lay before you. We're fortunate to work with a variety of clients all over the country, and now increasingly all over the world, whether it's through brand and strategic planning or capital campaign communications, which is really where a lot of this is going to focus today. So Tierney, you can probably just click through a couple of those. You'll see we're doing some work with the University of British Columbia for a multi-million-dollar campaign. A little closer to home, we're working with Save the Redwoods. They've just finished up a capital campaign. And again, also in San Francisco's backyard, some prior work for San Francisco AIDS Foundation. And then also, we work with smaller, more intimate campaign communications for independent schools and smaller nonprofits. So that's our lens through which we're approaching this work. We wanted to just set the stage a little bit, and again, I'm thinking about my folks who are saying they're somewhat neutral or somewhat less comfortable. I want to share the journey of how we came into this work in hopes that it might sort of set the stage for what you need to do to really come into this work with authenticity. So we, as far back as 2016, we were really trying to develop a team that was more reflective of the work and the communities we serve. And we knew, honestly, that we came across as too white. If you had gone on our website and looked at our team, that was really evident. And so we were posting on affinity job sites for people of color. We were approaching this work through the lens of seeing diversity as the end goal. And in fact, we thought, we can't help who applies. We put the job postings out there. Maybe there just aren't nonprofit brand strategists who want to work in this way, who are people of color. And at the time, we were thinking really mostly about diversity of skin colors. And for years, nothing changed, not surprisingly. We might get a couple of applicants, but we thought it was out of our control. But, probably we'd been at this for a couple of years, and this was certainly before the national reckoning and the events of 2020. We really started to realize, maybe it's us. Maybe there's something that makes Mission Minded not a great place to work if you're a person of color, or something about the way we're recruiting. And so we wanted to sort of work with that hypothesis and see if we could move the needle a little more. So we took some action. We hired a consultant in 2019 as a DEI consultant with our goal to be, let's get more people of color on our team. And in the search for a consultant, we realized with their help that we actually had the wrong goals. And this may not be a surprise to some of you who are further along in this journey. It was to be diverse, we actually needed to be more inclusive. And that's going to really link up to some of the messages and language we're talking about today. The consultants we hired weren't a good fit for us for a bunch of reasons. We really, I think the one thing that we realized was that while we were willing to be uncomfortable in this work, we didn't want to be shamed. And so we wanted a partner that we could have a trusting and mutually beneficial relationship with. And then we found Tierney, and I think you'll know just in the discussion today that working with Tierney is really a joy, even through the hard conversations, some of which he and I had yesterday and the day before. So our last piece of this is it's our job to not only be more inclusive ourselves, but we're really on a quest to help our clients be more inclusive. So finding ways for everything we do to herald inclusivity. We knew, of course, that we weren't blind to the idea that this would be an advantage for us in business development, but we recognize that we have a long way to go on this journey. And it's just that spirit of vulnerability that I want you to take away, that it's really an opportunity to ask hard questions so that you can come to a place where you can learn and move forward. T, anything you want to add to that journey?
No, that was awesome, Sarah. And within looking at today and how we as an organization at Mission Minded have really grappled with what does it mean to be inclusive? What does it mean to create inclusive messaging? What does it mean to create equitable communications? We have created um, 7 questions for inclusive messaging. And so just to give you a brief agenda of how this is going to go today, we'll go through some definition and level setting because I'm a person who always wants to be like, what does this actually mean? And then I can figure out how I'm going to do it. Then we'll jump into the 7 questions for inclusive messaging that you should be asking yourselves. We'll go through some community foundation messaging examples that we at Mission Minded have created and then grown over the course of our interactions, not only in-house, but also with the client as well. Then we'll invite, and then we'll talk about how to actually invite your donors into this journey. Sometimes that is not always an easy thing, and we have to highlight and be honest about that. And so we'll showcase a story around that, and then we'll just end with a recap and some questions.
Yeah, and Tierney, I just want to add that it would be great if you could hold questions till the end. If you're the kind who needs to write it down to be sure, you're welcome to pop them in the chat and Elia will capture them for us, but we're going to try and get through this and then make sure we reserve time for questions at the end.
Absolutely. All right, so first I want to focus on inclusion lens framing. And what I've actually done here is just broken down the definition of inclusion into 3 points. So first, authentically bringing traditionally excluded groups. What this is really saying is that there has to be an authentic approach to this. It can be something that you want to do, but you really have to think about how you're doing this. How are we welcoming people into this? How are we welcoming our community? How are we welcoming new communities into the story that we're trying to craft and tell around the communications and amazing programming that's happening at the organizations? Inclusion is the first step to achieving true equity. So again, when we're thinking about inclusive messaging, we have to remember that inclusion is the first step to true equity. So inclusion is the welcome in, the invitation into this to participate in this in a way that has traditionally left marginalized individuals out of it. And so again, when we are taking that first step, we have to see inclusion as the first step to actually moving into true equity. And third, has to involve people and activities, policies, et cetera, who haven't traditionally been involved again. So what we're doing is, again, moving away from telling stories about people, and actually what we're doing is involving them in their stories. They become the voice and action of their stories, not the organization, not the foundation, not the nonprofit. The individual going through that journey of the program that you all have created is at the center of that. And then all of the benefits that they've received of that are going to highlight within the inclusive and equitable language that you all are creating around that story. Now we'll jump into equity lens framing, which is a little different. First, unprejudiced treatment, access, and opportunity for all people. So again, we're coming around with the view of who is the community that we're talking about. We have to be very specific about the systematic inequities that this community has faced, because that is going to allow us to be able to tell stories in the most honest and authentic way and honoring where they are. Second, equity establishes policies and practices, creates opportunities, and ensures everyone has the tools and support they need to achieve their individual success. So now we're going even deeper. What is it that the participant needs in order to see the vision of how they see your programs benefiting them come true? It's not necessarily, oh, we provide all of these things. It's no, well, actually, I went in here for this. And not only did I get this, but I got that and I got that. And I was connected in all of these other ways because that was what I needed in order to feel successful. That was what I needed for my own individual success. And in encapsulating those 2 frameworks, we'll jump into the 7 questions you should ask to make your messaging more inclusive. So 1, are you using person-first language? I'll dive into a bit of person-first language and then I'll go into this example. So person-first language, simply put, is honoring the person first. Historically, communication in general has always talked about someone's hardships before it has named their humanity. And that is not just a nonprofit thing, that is just a communication thing. And when we're talking about using person-first language, it really does allow us to see the humanity in someone. So it's not putting their circumstance before them as a person. So the example here is holistic supports aren't always provided at school. Oftentimes, youth in marginalized communities face challenges that can derail them from focusing on school. I'm going to pause right there. In tradition, this wouldn't be written this way. It probably would have been written, oftentimes marginalized youth face, and again, it's not adhering to the humanity of these individuals. They are people first. Yes, they are marginalized, and that is an outcome of systematic inequity, but we have to uplift their humanity first. So we always want to be utilizing person first language. Now the question has come into account, well, what if the person doesn't use person first language? That's okay. They're describing themselves. So I can describe myself in that way if I want to describe myself as a marginalized community group. I can do that. I am in the community group in which I am saying I am marginalized about. But when we're telling stories, the purpose of utilizing those inclusive and equitable language, equitable lenses, is to make sure that we are uplifting the humanity first, and then talking about the circumstance next. I'll go through the rest of that example. These challenges include academics, food, shelter, or social emotional needs. Youth and their families deserve a partner that takes a holistic look at their needs like mental health, food, and housing security as enrichment opportunities to identify any resources or supports that might help them live more fully. Question 2, are your actions with or for? Now, when we are thinking about the traditional nonprofit messaging strategy, the organizations, the foundations, the nonprofits have traditionally put themselves in the driver's seat. They put themselves first. We are doing this. We are helping the community. We are making sure these people are fed. We are making sure people are clothed. We are housing people. And what that is setting up is a savior complex, because there are a whole bunch of other nonprofits that are doing and will be doing what you are doing. And so how do you really create messaging that shows that there's a partnership actually happening here, that we're doing this with our program participants and not for our program participants? They have a choice. They have a say in the services that they want, and they have a say in the services that they would like for organizations to provide. And so when we're thinking about how we want to be in genuine relationship with our program participants, we have to think about it doing it with them and not for them. And so the example here is youth.org is a long-term partner to you. We believe that through a deep, sustained commitment to students and their families, our community can thrive, and our work together can be a key catalyst in fighting systematic oppression. We travel side by side with the same group of youth and their families as they navigate education and life, offering academic, social, and emotional support as they learn, grow, and achieve their dreams. No one should take this journey alone. When we fulfill our promises, anything is possible. And so what I really want you to focus on is the bolded piece there of the we travel side by side. You know, it is already laying out that this is not an us thing. This is a we thing. We are doing this together. Yes, we have the resources, but we can have all the resources that we needed in order to help the problems. But if people were not there, if people did not want to participate with us, we wouldn't be serving, we wouldn't be doing the mission-driven work that we want to be doing. So we really have to be focusing on, we're doing this with individuals instead of doing this for them.
Tierney, I just want to add something too. This is a couple of ideas here. You know, when you're talking about we, it's putting you as the organization in the driver's seat versus the actual participants or clients who are using the services. And in many ways, that goes back to the person first language and the humanity, seeing the humanity first. That it's actually that person doing the work. You are a partner in some of the portion of their journey, but you are not driving their journey. The one thing also I want to talk about is that we know that there are times when talking about what you do, what you provide are important. And those are things like grant applications. You know, you're writing a grant, you're probably going to be more specific about what you provide and what you're doing. And that makes sense in that context. This is in the broader context of trying to communicate and put out a broader narrative about the work that is happening and who's participating in that work.
Excellently put, Sarah. You would speak completely different in a grant application because you'd be wanting to show numbers, you'd be wanting to show data. And even in that, there's a beautiful and positive way to tell that story as well that can still utilize some of these attributes. Thank you so much, Sarah, for naming that.
Sure.
Our third question is, are you using asset-based framing? And I just want to get a quick, I'm not going to do a poll, but if you can just raise a hand, if you know how to do that on Zoom, who's heard of asset-based framing before? And I'll see them kind of pop up. Okay, I'm seeing some hands. Awesome, awesome. Okay, thank you all so much. And so before I get into the story about G, simply put, asset-based framing is really focusing on the positivities in someone's life, if I can just put it simply. It is it is highlighting, it is uplifting, it is utilizing dignity to tell a story about, again, a community, a person who has traditionally been disenfranchised due to systematic inequity. It is a way to hold the humanity of the program participant who might have gone through a lot of struggles and now has come out on the other side of that in a very asset-based way that doesn't highlight the struggle in a way that would demean a person, but highlights what they've been through as the catalyst to how they got to the outcome. And again, the resources that you all have provided as the mission-driven organizations that you are. And I'll get into kind of the foundation around asset-based framing, but I really do want to hop into this story about G. And so what I want you to do is, as I'm reading through this, this is very slight, and some of you may catch it and some of you may not, but I just want you to think about what's happening in this story as I go through it. G is a creative and thoughtful kid who hasn't been at the Boys and Girls Club, who's been at the Boys and Girls Club for 10 years. When they think back their shy self, they see moments where they might not have made it to where they are today without the support of their family, both the ones at their own home as well as the staff at their club. Like many young people, G has tried to figure out what their gifts are and how they can use them to imagine a life they want to live. From the day they walked into the club, where they immediately felt accepted, they were encouraged to discover what got them fired up, be it sports, arts, civic engagement, or education. Joining the Think Like a Genius program was where G found their spark. Club kids were challenged to find a world problem and devise solutions for it in their community. The kids decided to start a community-based group that promotes acceptance of LGBTQ plus youth. G was fired up. Teens like G are the future of our community, and aren't we lucky that's so? They know that a more inclusive city benefits all of us and makes our community stronger. G has mixed feelings about heading off to college to pursue their passions, but they know they have Boys and Girls Club cheering for them. Just as we do for every single kid, we have the privilege to connect at our clubs. And I'll open up my chat feature if I can. I also can't see my cursor right now, so I don't know where my mouse is. Technology, awesome. But you can also come off mute as well if you know the answer to what this story is doing here.
T, in case you can't see it, I'll tell you that someone says G is the story, not the Boys and Girls Club.
Absolutely. What else is happening? I see we got two chats. I can see the number in the chat, but I can't see them.
G is in control of the story, highlights their personal experience and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all great.
It is. So that's amazing, but it's again, it's so simple. We have utilized a specific pronoun to name G. We're utilizing their instead of he or she. And it is something that is like super simple that you might not think about, but really does honor the humanity of the story of the person that we're talking about. It is so great when your audience won't even recognize what you're doing because they're already kind of steeped in it. And this is one of those easy ways to do that. Now, again, we're not going overboard here and putting it in big bold letters and they. No, you don't have to tell the story like that in order to honor someone's humanity. But wherever a traditional pronoun of a boy or girl would go for a person who is non-binary, we have the duty as a community that they are involved with to uphold that and to tell that in story. And so again, those are quick tweaks that you can always do when you're telling a story of a person, you know, who might be different, who might not fit into the traditionalism of communications. And again, in order to honor them completely, we want to uphold that with them.
Yeah, and I'll just add, just for perspective, you know, in the old days, we might have told that story as, you know, G is a trans kid who blah, 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 blah. You know, then we're identifying them in a way that it is not authentic to them. It's not their story. So you can see how we're starting to shift.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. Have you challenged expectations? And so in, again, the traditions of nonprofit writing, terms like at-risk youth, which are still being used today by some organizations, terms like poor, even the tension some people have versus homelessness and houseless, you know, there are real conversations that are happening around language, and is that language actually challenging the expectations of the community or the groups that we're telling stories about? And so this is an example of how you can talk about individual communities in a way that not only challenges expectations, but just talks about the things that they just might want to do that they might not be able to say, but just like the avenues and the possibilities that they have because of the work that you all are doing. And so this reads, veterinarian, musician, astronaut, writer, entrepreneur. The possibilities for what our youth can grow up to become are endless. Our youth strive to realize these dreams. In order to realize these dreams, we must nurture personal passions and sparks of interest from an early age. I won't read the rest, but again, there is a movement away from the traditions of talking about, again, someone's economic status, of, you know, low socioeconomic students, you know, deserve this. No, let's talk about the possibilities that can just happen, you know, whether it is a veterinarian, musician, astronaut, a writer, an entrepreneur, we know that those possibilities are endless, especially when they're connected with us, because this is the work that we want to do. So when you're telling that story, again, you don't have to tell it from a deficit-based framework, you can tell it from the possible that you all are trying to make happen. Why are your programs so important? Why your curriculum is so important in the way that it reaches out and talks to particular demographics of people. All of that is shaping not only how your community will see the work that you're doing, but also too how your program participants will see themselves in the stories that you're telling. 5, have you named the thing? So Sarah has heard me say this probably since the first day she has met me. And this is something I've just coined because I believe it is one of the easiest ways for us to have honest, transparent, and authentic conversations that also really do allow us to be able to tell the truth about the things that people have and are experiencing. And so at its simplest form, name the thing, is just talk about it. Is this racism? Is this systematic inequity? Is this disenfranchisement? Is this transphobia? Is this sexism? When we're able to name that, then we can really start from the base of, this is a real thing. How then do we talk about that real thing to our community? How do we highlight this story in a way that, again, still uplifts the humanity in this person, but doesn't water down the experiences that have led to the atrocities of systematic inequity that have impacted particular communities of color? So quick fixes don't solve systematic inequities. This is an example. We live in a society that protects and reinforces the privileges of its white middle-class citizens through systems and bias. The only way to reverse this is through a long-term commitment to change. To impact systematic inequities, we work side by side with our youth and families to navigate these systems, advocate for change, and right the inequities. So again, this is a very deliberate way in naming the thing here. We are doing a very deliberate call out. This organization in particular you might see that there's a similarity with the side by side. This is the exact same organization as the above example. But again, there was a need to be this honest about what they were talking about because of the demographic of individuals that they were working with. They needed to be very specific that there is a dire difference between these groups, and we need to own that, we need to honor that, but we also need to talk about what we're doing about that with our program participants to dismantle it. And a quote from Traybran Shorter, who I like to call the father of asset-based framing. He really is an amazing person who has been pushing and pushing us to think about the way that we tell stories about people in general, specifically about Black and Brown individuals, because it really does allow us to grow and think in different ways that we might have been stunted in because of the ways that we've just been so programmed to view, read, and ingest media. And so the quote simply says, while it's right to point out injustices, disparities, and needs, it's dead wrong to do it by deeply associating all these problems with the people who experience them. This unintentionally, but categorically lets systematic instigators off the hook. So again, we're not holding anybody accountable here. And that's the point. We got to hold the systems accountable. We got to hold the inequity accountable. And that doesn't mean that we do that in a way that demeans the person who has been put through it. No, we uplift. We want to embrace. We want to partner with, as well as dismantle with, bring awareness to, and continue to do the mission-driven work that you've all set out to do. So within naming the thing, again, I want you to name the community, the system, or the why behind the inequity, what is actually happening here. And a way that you can really think about doing that is first, just be intentional. What are we actually talking about here? Ask yourself the why, simply put, question your assumptions. If you come to a realization too quick, be like, oh, wait, hold on, let me put a push pin there. I came to that too quickly. Third, hold the communities we are serving in the center. Most of the time when we are creating messaging, we are doing that by ourselves. We don't have program participants in front of us. We've probably done some interviews. We probably have some direct quotes, but we are building this story with our own minds. And with our own minds comes our own implicit and explicit bias. And so we always have to be holding the communities we are serving in the center when we are creating these stories. And lastly, continue to create from a place of inclusion. When you can do these things and naming the thing, it really will allow you to be aware of what we're talking about, talk about it in a way that honors the individuals that have been through it and continues to hold and be inclusive of the people and program participants and the outcomes that we want to see them get to. 6, have you acknowledged BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color realities? So the first thing I actually want to talk about, I'm going to flip this slide. I want to start with intersectionality. And intersectionality is a key understanding is a key in understanding the different identities that we have as people and how those identities impact us. And so the example here is living as a Black man who is gay is different and from experiencing, than living as a Latino woman who is straight. If I added something else into there, maybe this was an individual experiencing a disability, that is another intersection that comes with other oppressive and discriminatory tactics. So when we talk about acknowledging BIPOC realities, we are really highlighting, like, are we talking about this in the way that is really going to allow this story to be told in its truest and honest form? Are we upholding the honesty of systems that have been entrenched with inequity? Are we upholding that communities of color have been disenfranchised, and this is how we see partnering with them and the outcomes that are going to happen when we do that correctly? Acknowledge that individuals from different communities go through different experiences because of systematic inequity. And so when we are calling into question of, are we acknowledging the full experience of these individuals, it really does allow us to create more inclusive and equitable messaging, because again, we're centering them, we're centering what they've been through. We're not necessarily shining a light just on that, but we are centering the systematic inequity, as well as now creating language that disapproves that, also talks to us about how we want to create new, how we want to participate in new ways, how we want to utilize our resources in new ways to fight against those things as well.
T, I want to just add something here to kind of put a fine point on that, which is if you are writing on behalf of an organization that serves folks that are not an identity that you identify with, that's a lot of identity words, it's really important that you use that extra filter. Are you making assumptions in your writing because you are not sitting in the shoes of those with whom you work? So you have to kind of go back and re-engineer it and look at it through that lens to make sure that you're being fair and authentic in your representation. I'm reminded of this because Tierney and I were just having a conversation about a client a couple of days ago. And it was, he challenged some assumptions about, how do you know that to be true for that particular client and constituent? And so it's kind of an extra check that I go through as I'm writing like this.
And this simply says each will experience inequity and racism in different ways. Honoring the difference allows people to be seen for who they are as an individual rather than as categories. And if you have grown up in the United States, categories are a real thing here. And there are benefits to categories because you are able to see something and put it in a box quickly. But there are also huge issues with that as well, because we are able to see something quickly and then put it in a box that it might not belong in. And so again, when we're able to really honor the difference, it really does allow people to be seen as individuals. Once we recognize that our organization's services and programs do impact people differently, this will allow us to tell stories in an authentic way through their voices, while also prioritizing their identity. It's important that lived experiences of those we serve is acknowledged and uplifted. And our last question, is this your story to tell? So in big, bold blue, in big, bold, mission-minded blue, I love that color, get consent. And within getting consent, there's some questions that you should be asking yourself. Who should tell the story? Should this story actually be coming from the program participant? I know I work with our strategists a lot about that. Like, is this a real story? If so, this needs a quote. This needs to come directly from the person. I do not want the organization to say that they have done this because it's going to put them in a savior seat. And that's not the intention of what this message is trying to do. So who should be telling those stories? Second, do we have consent to use those stories? And can that consent be retracted? And this is very important because someone might not see themselves in the story that we still want to talk about. It might be an amazing story. It might uplift the amazing work you all do, but it might be their shame. And they might not want that continually told because they're not in that same place. And I think the beauty within that is that then how do you reframe the story? How do you involve them in the storytelling? It's like, okay, you no longer want that to be told in that way. How would you like us to now create that story? True, it's going to take a little longer, but again, it's within that concept of with, not for. No. This is an amazing thing, but we understand that this is not where you are anymore. How do we curate something new? Third, is the consent informed? Where and how will it be used? So really explaining to an individual whose story you're using, this is where this is going. This will be in our brochure. It'll be in our annual report. It'll be here. It'll be there. Or it'll be in a grant. This is what we're doing this for, to do this and raise these funds. Really involve them in that process as well. Can the story subject change or edit the story? So similar to the second point, be open to that. A person might not be in the place that they were when it was like, yes, I want that story told exactly that way. And then lastly, have you offered compensation for the story? So as a nonprofit, resources can be scarce. I tend to tell my nonprofit clients, no scarcity mindset. There are enough resources out there for all of us. We just have to go about it in a different way, because I really do believe that. But in offering compensation, it is a small gesture to a person because we are utilizing their stories to raise funds. Now, that doesn't mean that we're utilizing them to raise funds and like, that's just that. No, we're utilizing them to raise funds so we can have more stories like this, which is a beautiful thing. But if we can give a small token of gratitude to the work that they have helped us curate and the money that they have helped us, stabilize our infrastructure, then that is a great thing that we can do.
T, one thing you and I talked about was this is, easier to do in writing because you have the time, you can reach out to the person, etc. There are a million ways that you communicate this idea about storytelling. I was thinking in particular about events where sometimes we I'm going to use the specific word, we trot out one of our clients to tell their story to a group of, mostly white donors to raise paddles and do things. And we want to give thought to that as well. Some of these rules don't apply in terms of actual writing and crafting of a story, but this kind of filter can be brought to other places where you are communicating the relationship between those who are help funding your work and those with whom you're working alongside in their journeys.
Absolutely. All right, Sarah.
All right. So that's 7, and we're going to just pop some examples up for you that just might help bring this to light a little more. T's been doing it along the way, but I wanted to just share a couple that we're working on right now, because in the true spirit of vulnerability, this work is never done. I say it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You get to the one end and then you turn around and you go backwards, because there's always something to learn. And if you come into it with that growth mindset, you won't ever feel like, oh, I should have gotten that. Like, you'll get better and better at it as you go. But you got to start somewhere. So before I share this community foundation work, I just want to say a few things about our model that we use for messaging, because you're going to see a couple of messages here. One is called a belief message, and that's sort of the big idea. What's the 30,000 foot thing that we believe? And often in capital campaign fundraising, we'll go into, and what are the opportunities that are out there in the world that present themselves as an opportunity for someone to engage with us? So I'll show you what we've been working on. This is a current client. This work is not yet live. That's why they are named Community Foundation in a generic way. And here's where we started. We did this work, I'm going to say, within the last month. And this was talking about, this region has led the world on social justice for generations. We have this opportunity to tackle today's challenges for decades. We've bridged our way of working with community, business, philanthropic, et cetera, et cetera. And in this moment of focus, we see an opportunity for concerted collective action. Really good start to this. There are some things we did well here. There are some things we could have done better. And the way it works at Mission Minded, there's, we look through the lens of these 7 questions, and then we meet with others, some who are not as close to the project, so they have a different eye. And Tierney looks at everything that goes out our doors to also make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible. So here are some of the adjustments we made in the after to make this as inclusive as possible. So at the foundation, we believe in the promise of our city, the promise that here everyone can prosper and thrive. For 20 years, we've united government, business, philanthropy, etc. Racial equity and economic inclusion are in the spotlight now. That is naming the thing, right? Before it said in this moment of focus, and we assumed that people would know in this particular community there are economic issues that are going on. We made that assumption. Nope, we're going to name the thing, racial equity and economic inclusion. And then specifically, we're going to start to talk about the systemic changes that need to happen, right? That's fixing the city's housing crisis, realizing a livable wage for all, increasing political participation of historically excluded communities. And then at that end there, you'll see an example we talked about with, not for. Galvanizing combined efforts to create a deep and lasting change is what the foundation does best. So galvanizing, bringing together, we're not doing this for people, we're doing this with people. One other example for you. This is an opportunity message. What are the opportunities that exist in the world that give us the chance to say, great, we want to get on board with that particular organization? So this one was about demonstrating change for endemic systems. Again, like, we're working on this. Endemic systems to change. First, the people and the organizations that enable those systems need to change. Just because business or government has operated in some way for decades doesn't mean we can't demonstrate a more effective way. Awakening to the need for change comes first, then action follows. When we prove that even hard change is possible, we make progress undeniable. Couple of things we did there. I want to be mindful of time because I want to make sure we have room for some questions. I would ask you to throw in the chat, and you can do it, and Tierney can look at it if you can see things that are like, maybe they could have improved that. But in the meantime, Tierney, why don't you hop to the after, and I'll just share what we saw. You might even see more, which is great. That means you're on your way. All right, we're going to name it. We're just going to name it. When Tierney said name the thing, before it was just because business or government or philanthropy has operated in some way for decades, right? We got real specific. They've operated in a way that disenfranchised people for decades. And then again, this is another one of those examples of with, not for. We believe those who've been impacted most deeply must be involved in changing those systems and practices. So it's the idea of with, not for, and it's the naming the thing. Just 2 examples of taking those 7 questions and putting them into practice. The last thing we want to speak to, and then we'll just do a quick recap and open it for questions, is how do we invite donors into this journey? The truth is you're going to make some people uncomfortable. That's the truth of it. And it might be people on your board. It might be some of your donors. That is the reality of it. But we want you to be thinking about what that also presents as an opportunity. You all showed up here today for an hour, so you obviously know and have a commitment to leading with stories and messaging that feels more inclusive. But I want to talk a little bit about this particular example. So T, if you can just hop to the next slide. This is one that you've seen before. We talked about this earlier. This is the Colorado I Have a Dream Foundation. They mentor youth from communities that are underrepresented, and our work was to develop a brand and messaging strategy to reflect their DEI commitment. This meant that we had to name the systems of equality that they work to address, and Tierney talked about this, but we live in a society that protects and reinforces privileges of its white middle class systems through systems and bias. And it's fair to say that this board had a lot of white middle class people on this board. So it was really naming that as something that benefits them and doesn't benefit the very people that they're working with alongside in the Colorado I Have a Dream Foundation mission. So I'm going to let the executive director, Kim Sia, tell you what happened next.
So going back to the exact example of naming this, we actually had a donor because this message then started showing up in our newsletters and in our social media, and not exactly this message, but obviously actions and things happening in the organization related to it. And we had a longtime donor who was really upset by it and said they were not going to give to us anymore, and reached out to our board chair. And our board chair used this language, like composed an email, sent it to me to review, but used this language. And I think through our conversations and through the fact that we had determined as an organization who we were, and this is our brand, and this is, we're not going to shy away from what we say. I didn't even have to change a thing in my board chairs in the email. I mean, it was so powerful to me how important, you said earlier, Zach, repeat, repeat, repeat. And we've been doing that since we have wrapped up our work together. We just keep repeating it with our various stakeholders to be able to say that. And so it was really powerful for us and for our team and for other board members to see that happen, because the donor actually didn't stop donating and ended up being a donation anyway. So it all turned out in the end, but it's about sticking to your brand and who you are. People worry so much about losing the donors, but not thinking about the donors you gain. And I will say I have stories on that side of it as well. As soon as our messaging started to shift, we had folks who previously had not given to the organization who said, "Ooh, I think something interesting is going on over there. Let me find out more." And it did help as well.
Yeah, I just want to point out 2 quick things that Kim said there. One is the opportunity to educate. If you're sitting in this webinar, you've made a commitment to anti-racist communications, which means you have the opportunity to bring people along. Here's why we're talking about it this way. They just might not know. They just might not be on the journey yet. And that's an opportunity you get when you use this kind of language. And secondly, I love her point about, for every one donor you may lose, you are opening the door to a whole new different group of people who really want to get on board with the kind of work you're doing and the way that you're talking about your work. T, you want to wrap us up and then we'll open it up?
Yes, I will. So just to recap, these again are the 7 steps, the 7 questions to continue to ask yourselves to make your messaging more inclusive. I won't read them all because I've just read them all, but please utilize these when you are thinking about creating more inclusive and equitable messaging that you really do feel is going to not only take your communication to another level, but really take your focus on equity or inclusion to another height. This is an in addition to, instead of a precursor. When organizations are moving through their equity and inclusive journeys, again, there are building blocks and steps that you will continuously take, because this journey never ends. It continuously goes. And so I thank you all for coming today and utilize this as much as you possibly can. We do have a QR code here. If you do scan this, this will put you on our mailing list. It will also, there's also some cool things that pop up on this. So a few of my blog posts pop up on this. Some of Sarah's blog posts pop up on this, as well as there's an opportunity for us maybe even to read some things for you pro bono and just, again, start to really help you build those muscles and really utilize those inclusive and equitable lenses. So thank you so much.
Yeah. I think we have time for just a couple of questions.
And I'll stop sharing my screen.
I would say the one thing I'll say too is just get started. It's always hard, but just get started. I see Rachel with her hand raised. I'm also kind of scanning the chat at the same time. Rachel, you want to get us started?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you so much for this. A lot to sit with and think through. One of the things that really stuck with me is about getting consent for stories. And I work for Planned Parenthood's national office. We're like a huge organization. And also being at the national office, we're very removed from like the work happening on the ground. So a lot of the times like stories kind of filter up. And like our CEO talks a lot about like a patient we helped navigate out of her state to get abortion and how she couldn't get on a bus because she didn't have shoes. And I thought about what you said about like, you know, is that a story that this patient would want out there, even if we're not naming her, even if she's just kind of like a representative. But I guess my question is like, you know, what if you kind of anonymize someone, is there still like ethical considerations for sharing these stories? And otherwise, like, how do you do that when you're so removed?
I'm dying to answer this. T, you want to start and I'll finish?
You jump in first, Sarah.
Okay. Yeah. You know, we are all in this work because we are trying to uplift the communities that we serve. And I feel like every time we create a narrative that's reinforcing negative stereotypes, this poor girl didn't have shoes, couldn't get on the bus, you know, we are backtracking the very work that we're here to do. So like my gut is it's never okay, even if they're anonymous, because we are all communicators and we're putting stories out in the world and we're trying to shift the way narrative has been told in a very white savior based way that has kind of gotten us to where we are today. So I would say, you know, I appreciate that when you're sort of, it's the trickle down and the trickle up, you could take that message and reframe it. You know, it might have come to you that way and you can reframe it and send it back to your chapter and say, here's how we're doing it now. You saw one of the examples was Boys and Girls Club, and we had a lot of interesting discussion at the national level and at the chapter level. And sometimes the change comes from the grassroots folks at the chapter level, and sometimes it comes from the national organization. Both ways work, but I'd say always and forever, be person first. Tierney, you want to add something?
The only thing I'm going to add is within that reframe, instead of she was denied access because she didn't have shoes, I'd actually highlight on just why she was denied, like the craziness of her being denied access to go and doing something that she needed to do. Shouldn't have mattered she had on shoes, flip-flops, or anything. She needed a service to be done and this held her back from doing that. I'd really focus on that. And I think within a way of reframing that, like, and this isn't to like, you know, to dog Greyhound, I meant to use that pun. But but it is a way to highlight some of the ridiculousness that stops people from getting the services that they need. And again, that is because of systematic inequity. Like you've built this around because typically our minds will go, oh, a person without shoes is probably homeless or poor. And again, we don't need to make that assumption, but what we can talk about is, again, the barrier that did allow for her to move through.
Thanks, T. I want to just point out there was an earlier question about the nuances of identity, and it was inclusion by itself is a great concept, unless we get into the nitty gritties of what our identities are. And I hope that question was sort of answered when we talked about acknowledging realities and intersectionality. Just you know, again, it comes back to just recognizing who that person is and what their experience is.
Mhm.
Wanda, I feel like I should toss it back to you because it's 12:59.
Yeah, really quick. Thank you so much, Sarah and Tierney. This was wonderful. I knew it would be a fabulous presentation, and I think everyone, and hopefully everyone, has learned and able to take away some really good information. And I think what's really important, we have some questions to continue to ask ourselves, a framework as we're doing this work. And as Tierney said, it is constantly a work in progress. So we're always kind of working towards this. So thank you so much for your time today. Really quick announcements. We have some great webinars coming up in July and August. I encourage you to go on our website at afpgoldengate.org to find out more information about it. National Philanthropy Day nominations are we're in the process now for accepting nominations up until Friday, July 7th. So if there are great people that are doing work in the community, in organizations, please submit nominations. We've revamped the process, and so we're encouraging people to be a part of that. And then lastly, with the great program today, joining our membership gets you reduced rates for great workshops, programming, great networking opportunities as well. So I encourage you to, if you're not a member of our chapter, please sign up. And then lastly, we'll be doing a follow-up survey to this and that you'll receive today. Please respond. We'd love to get your feedback on the presentation and any ideas you have for any other programs or events that you think we should consider. Once again, thank you again to Sarah and Tierney. And thank you to all of you who are participated today, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Pleasure. Thanks, Wanda. Thanks, AFP.
Bye.
Bye.